Shalom. I'm doing a class on Maimonides Mishneh Torah, Code of Law, for the synagogue, and I thought I could summarize the sessions on the internet, and then you'd be able to at least get the essence of it. If you want to get the book that we're using, it's the Mishneh Torah. It's usually in print, sometimes it's not, by Birnbaum. It's the abridged edition. The actual Mishneh Torah is 14 volumes, so this is one volume. Obviously excerpts a lot. It's Hebrew Publishing Company. Birnbaum is the editor. Now, if you want to know more about Maimonides, I have several videos. The first one is jewu 118 on Maimonides generally, and then jewu 255 is on the laws of tzedakah, 8 laws of charitable giving. Then jewu 27 is on the 13 principles of faith, what Jews believe. I have one on resurrection, his view of resurrection, and on the Yigdal prayer we do Friday nights, jewu 236, which also summarizes the 13 principles of faith. Now, in the 14 volumes of Jewish law, in first volume, he's got a section called Hichote, deot, the law's ethical ideas. It basically talks about the human personality and human being. He begins by saying that everybody has many traits, which is obvious. And then in the fourth law, he says, the right way is the middle course of human traits, namely the disposition which is equally distant from the two extremes, a la Aristotle. He says we should adjust all our virtues to the middle course so that we can enjoy physical health. Interestingly, he says, you should be neither hot-tempered nor easily provoked. You should only desire which the body needs for sustenance. You should exert yourself in your vocation only to obtain what is necessary. Very interesting. Kind of advice you can pick up in a magazine today, he said over 1,000 years ago. You should not be too tight-fisted or too lavish, but give charity according to your means. You shouldn't be hilarious nor gloomy, but be quietly cheerful. And then in number 6, he says you should imitate God as much as you possibly can. And then he quotes about how God is called slow to anger and abounding in kindness, righteous, just, perfect, and mighty in the Torah. Now, how do you train yourself if you're not in the middle course right now? He said practice it time and time again that towards the middle course of the predisposition. Now, how are you to be cured if you're not at the middle course? Here's what he said. For example, if you're hot-tempered, you're told to train yourself to a point that even if you're assaulted, you should pay no attention, and do this until you can achieve the middle course. If you're inclined to one extreme, you should move toward the opposite extreme and keep it for a long time until you return to the right path, which is the middle course. Now, he identifies 2 traits which he believes should be shunned to the extreme, that they should be on the extreme, and that is you should be lowly of spirit. Now, I used to think about why we should be meek. Hillel said, if I'm not for myself, who will be? And my teacher said that this is not meekness in terms of low spirit among regular people, but vis-a-vis God. We should always recognize our true place. And secondly, regard to anger, we should avoid anger at all extremes. Now, later on he says anger for a just cause is justifiable, but in general we should avoid anger to the extreme. And then he basically suggested that we should stay silent and don't just use frivolous talk. He quotes the Pirkei Avot saying silence is offense to wisdom. You should always avoid habits like flattery and make-believe. Don't say one thing and mean something else. Even a single word of deception is forbidden. Aim for truthful speech. Now, in Jewish law, I have another video on this. You're allowed to have little fibbing if it's a matter of preserving peace, but in general, always tell the truth. We shouldn't be addicted to jesting and mockery. We shouldn't be greedy. Don't be quarrelsome. Balance the course of your steps so that your ways will be right. He quotes Proverbs. Now, in terms of one quality, he says that asceticism is also not a Jewish trait. He says this too, not eating wine or eating meat or drinking wine, not marrying, not living in a decent home, not dressing neatly, the way of non-Jewish monks. This is the wrong way and must not be followed. Whoever takes this course is a sinner. So he says Jews are not required to choose the path of asceticism. In fact, he says, are there not prohibitions of the Torah sufficient for you that are adding others for yourself? He quotes Ecclesiastes saying, be not over good, be not over wise, why expose yourself to trouble? And then, this is continuing in chapter 3, he says, A man should direct his mind and all his actions exclusively to knowing God, whether you're sitting, rising, or talking. For example, your aim should not be hoarding money. I'm teaching this in the week after the Madoff huge $50 billion Ponzi scheme was exposed. Instead, do those things in order to obtain your physical needs. Also, when you eat and drink, you should only gratify your physical needs and not be overmuch. Now, he's also a doctor, and so he has a chapter here in chapter 4 on basic health issues, which the advice over 1,000 years later hasn't changed. He says, shun what is harmful to the body and cultivate health-preserving habits. For example, have 8 hours of sleep. That's sufficient. You should not go to bed immediately after a meal. As long as a person takes plenty of exercise, does not overeat, keeps his bowels regulated, he will contract no illness even though he eats inferior food, he says. So, basic health. Anyone who sits around idle and takes no exercise will be subject to physical discomforts and failing strength. He's a big proponent of exercise. So any very interesting basic health issues that are still true today. And then he continues, just as a wise man is noted for his wisdom and moral traits, for which he is distinguished, so he ought to be noted for his proper behavior, for his food and drink, for the manner of his speaking, walking, dressing, and the management of his affairs. A wise man does not shout and scream. He talks gently and never raises his voice. He gives everyone a friendly greeting, judges all men favorably, loves peace and strives for it, so that all are kindly disposed towards him. Quoting Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Ancestors. A wise man does not walk around haughtily. He should dress neatly, not wear clothes stained with grease or dirt. He manages affairs judiciously, eats, drinks, and supports his family according to his wealth and success. In other words, don't get over credit charges on your credit. So those are, a wise man is honest in all his transactions. And then he goes on to talking about in chapter 6 how it's normal to be affected by peer pressure. Therefore, you should associate with good and wise men, and shun evil men who walk in the dark and not learn their ways. Duty demands that every man love his neighbor as himself. Kind of basic rules quoting the essence of Judaism. Then he goes on to say, whoever shuns a fellow in public has no share in the world to come. And then he goes on to talk about how anyone should be especially cautious dealing with orphans and widows. Then in chapter 7, I already did a video recently on chapter 7, which talks about the laws of not slander, defamation, or telling tales. So that is the essence of the material we covered in the first few sessions of the course, dealing with Hichote, deot, the laws of ethics.